Mycenaean world was one of the strongest cultures in ancient Greece during the Late Bronze Age. This period lasted from about 1700 to 1100 BCE, and the Mycenaeans were at their peak between the 15th and 13th centuries BCE. They lived mainly in the Peloponnese region of Greece and reached across nearby islands like Crete and the Cyclades. Their name comes from their largest city, Mycenae. They didn't grow on their own. Before them, the Minoans on Crete had already built a rich and advanced culture, and the Mycenaeans learned a lot from them. They picked up ideas about buildings, art, and religion, but gave these things a tougher, more military style. Over time, they became the most powerful culture in mainland Greece, trading with places like Cyprus, the Levant, and Egypt. Their stories later helped inspire famous Greek legends, including tales from the Trojan War. There were many important Mycenaean cities, such as Mycenae, Tiryns, Pylos, Thebes, Midea, Gla, Orchomenus, Argos, Sparta, Nicoria, and possibly Athens. The Mycenaeans eventually settled on Crete too, taking over places like Knossos, and becoming the main force in the southern Aegean. Mycenae itself was the most impressive sight. It wasn't a capital city, but it was the largest. It sat high on a hill almost 300 meters above sea level. Archaeologists have found palace buildings, hundreds of tombs, and several large round tholos tombs there. You can still see parts of its huge walls and the famous Lion Gate from around 1250 BCE, with two carved lions standing above the entrance. We still don't know exactly how the different Mycenaean cities were connected politically. Palaces were centers for making luxury goods, while nearby villages mainly produced food. Some of the food was stored in the palaces, but we don't know whether each palace ruled over the villages or how they shared power. Even though the details are unclear, all Mycenaean sites had similar culture. They shared the same kinds of buildings, paintings, pottery, jewelry, weapons, and even the same written language, called Linear B. A typical Mycenaean palace was built around a large rectangular hall called the Megaron. This structure later inspired Greek temples. The Megaron had a porch, a small entry room, and the main hall with a big round hearth in the center. 4 wooden columns held up a ceiling with an opening for light and smoke. This was also where the ruler, known as the Wanax, sat on his throne. Palaces often had a smaller second hall, private rooms, storage areas, and workshops. The walls and floors were decorated with colorful frescoes, and the structures were built using rubble, plaster, and limestone on the outside. Columns and ceilings were usually painted wood. The Mycenaeans were also known for their massive defensive walls. These walls were made of huge, rough stones that were so large that later people believed only giants called Cyclopes could have moved them, which is why they're called Cyclopean walls. Some walls were as tall as 13 meters and up to 8 meters thick. You can see these walls at Mycenae, Tiryns, and Thebes. Mycenaean sites also had corbelled passageways, circular tombs with corbelled roofs, and huge doorways topped with large stone triangles to take the weight off the lintel. The Mycenaeans also changed their environment with terraced farming areas, flood control dams, and small stone bridges that looked like they were built by giants. Regular people lived in simple mud brick houses set on stone foundations, much more modest than the grand palaces. And they were also very active traders, moving goods and ideas all around the Mediterranean. We know they traded because of what archaeologists have found. In Mycenaean towns, there are objects that clearly came from other places, like gold, ivory, copper, and glass. In the same way, Mycenaean pottery has been discovered far from Greece, in places such as Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Levant, Anatolia, Sicily, and Cyprus. That tells us their ships were sailing long distances and connecting many different cultures. They probably also exported things that don't survive very well after thousands of years, like olive oil, perfumed oils, and wine. These would have been stored in jars and other containers that often broke or decayed over time, so we mostly have to guess their role by looking at what's left behind. The problem is, we don't have a lot of written records to explain exactly how their trade worked. Even at a major site like Mycenae, Only around 70 clay tablets written in Linear B have been found. One big clue, though, is the Uluburun shipwreck from the 14th century BCE, found off the coast of modern-day Turkey. This ship was packed with copper and tin ingots, ivory, glass discs, and other raw materials. It was probably on its way to workshops in Mycenaean Greece when it sank, giving us a frozen moment of what their trade networks might have looked like. The Mycenaeans also expressed themselves through art. Their painters and craftworkers clearly borrowed from the Minoans' love of nature and flowing designs, but they gave everything a slightly different feel. Their style was often more stiff, more simplified, and more geometric. Spirals, rosettes, and repeated patterns were very popular. Their pottery shapes were similar to Minoan ones, but they added some of their own favorites, like tall goblets and short squat jars known as alabastrons. They seemed to like big storage jars in particular. They also made terracotta figurines of animals and standing female figures, carved delicate sculptures out of ivory, produced stone vessels, and created very detailed gold jewelry. Their wall paintings or frescoes show what they cared about. You see plants and animals, lions and griffins, people leaping over bulls, scenes of battles, warriors riding in chariots, large figure of 8 shields, and dramatic boar hunts. Boar hunting especially seems to have been a favorite activity for Mycenaean elites. When it comes to religion, things get much harder to explain because the evidence is thinner. We do know that animal sacrifice was important, along with big feasts, pouring out drinks as offerings, and giving food to the gods. Certain symbols, like the double axe and the horns of consecration that also appear in Minoan art, suggest there were strong links between Mycenaean and Minoan religion, or at least that the Mycenaeans liked using the same powerful symbols. Some parts of their buildings hint that certain rooms were used for religious purposes. Sunken basins and frescoes showing altars suggest that the Megaron, the main hall we talked about earlier, may also have been a place for rituals, not just politics. Many centers had dedicated sanctuary areas near the palace where people could worship. Burial was clearly a huge part of their beliefs. Monumental tholos tombs and carefully chosen grave sites show that the dead were treated with serious respect. The rich objects buried with them, gold masks, crowns or diadems, jewelry and ceremonial swords and daggers, tell us that high-ranking Mycenaeans wanted their status to be seen even in the afterlife. The end of the Mycenaean civilization did not happen overnight, and it's still one of the big puzzles in ancient history. Their world slowly began to fall apart between about 1230 BCE and 1100 BCE. Between roughly 1250 and 1200 BCE, several major sites were destroyed, and this marks the start of what historians call the post-palatial period. During this time, the strong central palace system started to break down. The damage wasn't the same everywhere. Some places were hit hard, others only a little, and a few seemed to have escaped major destruction. Some sites were later lived in again, but often on a smaller scale and with far less wealth than before. A handful of places even grew larger and richer for a while. But by around 1100 BCE, most Mycenaean centers had shrunk into simple villages. Historians have suggested many possible reasons for this collapse. Some point to natural disasters like earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, or tsunamis. Others think about overpopulation, food shortages, social and political unrest, or invasions from outside groups such as the Sea Peoples. Climate change in the region may also have played a part. It's very possible that several of these problems happened close together and pushed the system past its breaking point. Whatever the exact mix of causes, the fall of the Mycenaeans was part of a wider Bronze Age collapse across the Aegean and Eastern Mediterranean. After this came a period often called the Greek Dark Ages. That name makes it sound completely hopeless, but it mostly means that life was simpler and there are fewer written and artistic sources for historians to study. From the 10th century BCE onward, some places began to recover, but it took centuries before Greek culture climbed back up to the same level of complexity and power that it had during the Late Bronze Age. Later on, in the Archaic and Classical periods, The Greeks looked back at the Mycenaean age as a kind of golden time. In their stories, people back then respected the gods more. Warriors were braver, and life was more straightforward and honorable. Famous heroes like Agamemnon, Menelaus, Achilles, and Odysseus were imagined as Mycenaean kings and fighters. Their deeds were kept alive in statues, painted pottery, and, most importantly, in epic poems like Homer's Iliad, which tells the story of the Trojan War and may preserve distant memories of real struggles between Mycenaean Greeks and their rivals.